Our job begins where most advisors stop. Saving money is great, but how do you spend it without risk in retirement? Welcome to Every Day is Saturday with Brad Gatto and Matt Stahl, partners and private wealth managers at Fiat Wealth Management. In this podcast, we aim to broaden your knowledge about the financial world we live in today and make the boring and complex financial decisions fun, informative, and educational. Join us on this journey where Brad and Matt will explore different strategies on how to spend your money without guilt and have peace of mind knowing you are spending it the optimal way in retirement.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Every Day is Saturday. I'm Brad Gatto, and I'm here with my partner, Matt Stahl. Say hey to everybody, Matt.
Hello, everybody.
It's always good to be back. It's after a couple of weeks off here, and we've been busy. Matt, what have you been up to?
All kinds of fun with the kids. We wrapped up a few soccer seasons, just trying to spend as much time as we can with them. Had a great interview with Gavin Kaysen last week.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of jealous. I
know.
First episode of our podcast, I was not able to be a part of. And of course, it's the time that you bring in the bigwig, the chef in the Twin Cities, Gavin.
Yeah, he's kind of a local celebrity around here. So I had a ton of fun. It was really interesting.
I think you did it on purpose. I think you scheduled it when
I did.
I was away so that you could be the guy that had him to yourself.
I got to ask all the questions. And how was your trip?
It was good. It's always good to have an opportunity to spend time working on your business and not in your business. And I got to spend some time with other successful advisors from different parts of the country to learn about what they're doing and what's working well and how they're taking care of their clients and how they're loving on their clients. And so it was a good couple of days to get away and spend some time on that. But that said, we've got a lot to talk about today, Matt, because we're going to do something that may kind of get us kicked out of the industry.
That's tough.
The good old boys club, if you will. Our industry is dominated, just to be very truthful, by men. And not only that, but older men. I think it's interesting that the amount of advisors in this country has actually shrunk over the last 20 years. There's less advisors today than there was 20 years ago. And on top of that, most of them are up there in age. I don't want to, use any words around it. We'll just say they're wise. But there's more advisors over the age of 80 than there are under the age of 30. And so it is kind of a good old boys club. That being said, one of the things about our industry, Matt, that's always frustrated me ever since we got into it is how vague or gray it is and how we're paid.
Absolutely. What are we going to do today?
We're going to tell people exactly how we're paid. With that being said, let's just dive into it as far as explaining to people exactly how we're paid. But Matt, I think it would be helpful if before we got to the numbers, just hang with us, we'll get there, to give a little bit of context, right? Because not all advisors are created equal. In other words, they're not all licensed the same. They're not all structured the same. And so there are advisors that are paid differently. And it depends on how they're regulated. And so let's just start there and talk a little bit about the licensing and regulation side.
Yeah. And before we jump into that, just to take a step back, what we're going to talk about first is the securities. So you think of stocks and bonds and mutual funds. There's a whole separate world that we're also going to cover as we go through this.
That's a great point, Matt, because a lot of advisors wear more than one hat these days anyway, where you get like take Fiat, for example, where we fancy ourselves comprehensive, kind of a buzzword in our industry. And so we have the ability to run securities business for our clients, but we also do some lines of insurance business. And that's a whole different set of compensation and how you're paid on the insurance side than it is on the security side. And the good news is for today, we're going to uncover both, right? We're not going to just stick to one or the other, because at the end of the day, we're paid in two different ways. And we think people should understand both. But for those wondering, most advisors out there, at least these days, have kind of a foot in the securities world and also a foot in the insurance world. Not all of them, but good point, Matt. So let's start on the security side, though. Let's talk about that first.
Yeah, absolutely. So to stay on the buzzword theme, many of you have probably heard the word fiduciary thrown out there. And so this does come down to a couple different things. It is what is that advisor? What are they beholden to when working with their clients, which is actually going to end up relating to how they get paid. But there's two different standards. There's a fiduciary standard and there's a suitability standard. And depending upon what kind of advisor that person is working with, let's start there. So I'm going to just read a couple of these different things to you as far as what suitability means or what fiduciary means. And so a suitability means that a broker, and remember that word because we're going to come back to it. So a broker works for a broker dealer, and that's whose interest they serve. Now, moving on from that, they operate on a suitability standard, which means the transaction must be suitable for the client's needs. Notice there's no word in there that says the best, the most optimal, no sort of that language, as opposed to on the fiduciary side. So many of us have probably heard the word fiduciary thrown around. That actually means that individual, that advisor, is beholden to put the client's best interests first before their own. And so kind of the overarching picture of this is those are two different paths, which can mean two different types of income. So as Brad and I, we both talk about, it's really helpful to get a history context of this stuff before we start digging into different details.
And as we do that, Matt, and give a little bit of that history, you mentioned that fiduciary is a buzzword, which it has been for the last couple of years because of the Department of Labor ruling that was out. I believe it started during the the Obama administration, but it's been around for a while now. And that this DOL ruling is kind of what put that word front and center. But before we go back even further, I just want to add to kind of these definitions, right? Because there's some advisors that are held to this suitability standard in air quotes, and then others that are held to this fiduciary standard. So if you look up like the technical definition, because suitability seems really gray, right? Like it's kind of vague. And so what does it really mean? And so a couple bullet points, you have to understand, they do have to understand their client's financial situation. They do have to be aware of the client's investment experience, and they have to know their client's investment objectives. Okay. So like they have to know all those things. And then that leads to them recommending products or solutions and give advice that's quote unquote suitable based on those things. So this best interest standard, this fiduciary standard, to kind of in comparison, to give some bullet points to help you really understand the difference, watch the language difference here, right? The first bullet point is they have to put their client's best interest first. Notice how that's not in the suitability standard. They have to act with prudence, provide full disclosure. They have to avoid any conflict of interest should it exist. And then they have to fully disclose and fairly manage in their client's favor and avoid any conflict if at all possible. And so just given those two kind of sets of lists, right? The first set of bullets that I read on the suitability standard, and then that second set of bullets. I think anybody that's handing over their life savings to somebody, of course, if they could, would pick that probably anyway. I don't want to, jump to any conclusions and make anybody's decisions for them, but are probably going to pick that second list there, knowing that they have to put their client's best interest first, act with prudence and full disclosure. And so that being said, it's interesting that we live in a world as an advisor that, depending on how you're licensed and how you choose to conduct your business, you can be held to different standards.
Absolutely. What would you want to take a guess what standard we're held to after going through all that?
Yeah. And it was by choice, right? I mean, because we weren't always, right?
Right. Exactly.
We didn't start in this industry under the fiduciary standard. Neither you or I did. And when we decided to leave the big box firm and go independent, we had a choice on how we wanted to structure our business and what we wanted to do. And we've slowly made our way over to the fee-only fiduciary advisor, which is that best interest side that we just got done discussing. But there are two sides. And so with there being kind of two sides of the business, there are two regulating bodies, and they are different that kind of provide the oversight for advisors that kind of have their foot either in the in the best interest side, the fiduciary side, or have their foot in the suitability side. So Matt, why don't you speak to that?
Yeah. So let's start with the fiduciary side. Most of us have probably heard of the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission. On the fiduciary side, that is the regulating authority, and that is a government institution. So their job, their specified role is to protect the investors.
Yeah.
And that was formed from going way back to the Great Depression. So that was the origins are from 1933. So there's a Securities Act put in place in 1933, and then the Securities Exchange Act in 1934. And
this gives me bad flashbacks to having, like, when I took my securities exams and having to study all of this and memorize, the Security Act of 33 of 1934. And there's another one in 1940. It gives me bad flashbacks, but you're right. It does go back a long way. And it actually, all of this came out because of the Great Depression.
Right.
Right. I mean, a lot of, they looked at the Great Depression and said, gosh, we don't ever want that to happen again. And so all these new laws about being, managing money or being in a position to recommend something to a client, they wanted to change the way that we could interact. And so these big laws were put in place, and the Securities and Exchange Commission is the one that regulates them. So,
and then the flip side of that, so the suitability standard is now regulated by what's called an SRO, which just stands for self-regulatory organization.
So it's not the government.
It is not the government.
Not a government entity.
Not a government entity. So it is under the purview of the SEC, but it is not a government entity. And so that is FINRA, which may be more familiar as the NASD, which was the origin of FINRA.
Yeah, they renamed it. I think in 2007, somewhere around there. Does that sound right to you?
Yes, in 2007.
Okay.
And so if you look and dig into the details, so FINRA is to oversee not necessarily the individual investors, but the firms and the stockbrokers within there. And I want you to remember that term, stockbroker versus advisor, because we're going to come back to that as we continue to dig in.
The important thing to note is, because some people listening are probably like, gosh, man, Brad, this is a lot of really detailed stuff. And I thought you were going to tell me how advisors are paid. And here we are talking about the SEC and FINRA and going back to, the 1934 Securities Act and stuff like this. But all of this kind of defines and gets us to a point where helping you understand how your advisor is regulated, first and foremost. And then that's going to lead down to how they can be paid, because how you're regulated is going to define how you're paid. And so let's just get there. I think that's probably gives a little bit of context, enough history anyway, for people to understand that there's two different worlds as it exists in the security side. And so let's talk, because we've been starting with the fiduciary side this entire time. Let's start with how fiduciary advisors are paid.
Yeah, absolutely. So fiduciary advisor, if I go see someone who is a fiduciary, that means that they're going to get paid one way and one way only. On the security side, they're going to get paid a fee to provide financial advice to me as a client. And that fee can be in the form of paying an assets under management fee. It could be a financial retainer fee. But I know if I'm going to see that advisor, there's nothing behind the curtain. There's nothing buried or hidden anywhere. Their fee is transparent and it's disclosed, and I see it directly.
What is the fee based off of, Matt?
So the fee, typically you'll see two different approaches. You've seen some other creative approaches. For the most part, it will be paid on assets under management. So if you come to me and you have a $500,000 IRA that I'm going to manage for you as a fiduciary advisor, I may charge you 1% per year to manage that, which means that over the course of that year, you're paying $5,000 for us to manage that IRA.
Now, Matt, you threw out 1%, and I think you and I flippantly throw that out because that tends to be kind of the ballpark average, whatever language you want to use there. But it's important for people to know that it's really up to the advisor.
Yep.
inside of the SEC's guidelines. So the SEC, they actually changed this recently. They used to say you could charge whatever they deem reasonable to your clients. And the kind of the top end of that used to be 3%. If you charge 3% or less, then they just kind of left you alone. Now it's 2%. And so on the high end, you're going to pay an advisor 2% per year to work in your best interest inside of whatever model they have and what they do for you. And then on the lower end, you could definitely pay less than 1%. And typically, Matt, and you can speak to this if you want.
Yep.
We see that with higher net worth clients where they'll get kind of a break point, kind of a Costco type pricing in their fee percentage because of the significance of the assets that they have.
You know what? 1% is just a nice, easy round number, and it's easy math for everybody. So
Yeah.
So that's one path is the AUM structure. And now
assets under management, AUM.
Assets under management.
Sure
Yep. Thank you. I don't like the jargon. I don't like the jargon any more than you do. So we have the assets under management fee on one side, and that can vary from firm to firm. So one financial advisory firm may provide true comprehensive services where it's tax planning, estate planning, retirement income planning, and another firm may just provide straight investment advice.
Yeah.
And so you may see two completely different fee schedules depending on the service that particular client is going to get.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll also see a flat retainer fee where that typically will be based on how many hours. So it would be similar to going to an attorney or a lawyer. So I'm going to pay X dollars per hour. And so that advisor is going to look at the scenario and say, hey, this is going to take me and my staff 20 hours. I'm going to charge $300 an hour. So this is $6,000. So that's typically another structure that you will see.
But the bottom line is the advisor is supposed to disclose, regardless if it's based on the assets that they manage, it's the percentage of the assets that they manage, or it's the flat retainer fee. It's supposed to be fully disclosed exactly what that fee is. And if it's based on assets under management, then somewhere on your statement, doesn't matter if you're at Merrill or Morgan and they have their own, internal platforms that they manage your money on, or you're working with an independent advisor like Fiat. And typically the custodians that you're going to see your money at are TD Ameritrade, Charles Schwab, or Fidelity, depending on where the money is at and the way the statements look. Somewhere on your statement, it should say exactly what you're paying your advisor. And more, I guess the majority of times, Matt, that's a quarterly fee. So 1/4 of whatever you're getting charged on an annual basis will come out once a quarter. Some advisors like us charge monthly. So a little bit of nuance on how they bill. But the bottom line is it should be on your statement somewhere. So if you're listening to this podcast and you're like, I'm pretty sure I work with a fee-based advisor, I just don't know where the fee's at on my statement. It's on there. Some of these firms don't do a very good job of, with language and just spelling out, this is your advisor fee. It just calls it a fee. And I think, I have my opinions on why they might do that. But the bottom line is it's on your statement somewhere. It's regulated by the SEC that it has to be there.
Absolutely.
So I think we kind of beat that one to a pulp here. So the SEC manages the fee-based advisors. They have a fiduciary standard and they're paid solely on either the flat fee or as a percentage of the assets that they manage. That's the end of the story. And so, Matt, you made the comment earlier. It's the only way that they're paid. So as an example, we don't get paid if a trade happens and there's a fee associated with that trade. None of that goes back to the advisor. If they pick XYZ mutual fund over ABC stock, there's nothing in them for, in that transaction. They don't get paid based on product or allocation or anything like that. They have no conflict of interest as it relates to investment decisions or trading the account or anything like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the other side of the world, the broker side that's regulated by FINRA, that we discussed earlier, the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority is what FINRA stands for. Talk to me a little bit about how those advisors are paid.
Thank you for clarifying that acronym. So I like to explain this in terms of, I see this as an evolution of what clients have demanded of advisors over time. So in my opinion, the stockbroker is the original advisor that most people think of, rewind back 40, 50 years. At that time, a stockbroker was the gatekeeper to information that the general public did not have. And so there was a purpose served. However, their financial motivation as a stockbroker was to call these people, be a salesperson to sell them on one particular stock of one company. I can keep going with the one company, one industry, one geography. Looking back in retrospect, you and I can sit here and say, oh my gosh, that was definitely not in the best interest of those people. But
it's easy to look back and be like, gosh, that's really archaic. Like
right.
that doesn't seem like in anywhere in that transaction, the client's best interests were at heart or in mind, or however you want to put that. I mean, even by today's suitability standard, which is very gray, when I was giving those bullet points earlier, you still today have to at least understand your client's financial situation, their investment experience, and their objectives.
Yep. Yeah.
Right. Still better than what you're discussing.
Yeah. So stockbroker, that's where it all started is. And you could also argue and say, perhaps those clients ended up better off because they wouldn't have bought that stock and wouldn't have enjoyed the stock market returns if they hadn't. But
well, gosh, with the market's at today, you could argue that almost any of those decisions would have been great decisions.
Right. So in my mind, this is kind of how I think of it. So I'm just sharing how my mind works on this. So stockbroker evolves into, as 401ks became more prevalent, mutual funds became more prevalent. Now, someone that has, $50,000 to invest isn't put in a position where they're putting all their eggs in one basket. They're not putting it all in one stock. They're not paying that stockbroker a one-time commission to put that money in one stock and never see them again. So now we have advisors that are out there helping people find mutual funds, which is just, it's a basket of stocks where we have some diversification and some ongoing service there. And in that scenario, I see it as an evolution because it's probably better advice than just putting all your money in one stock. And they're providing more service. Now they have the option, the advisor kind of gets to choose how they're paid. So they can say, hey, I want to take all my compensation up front, or I want a little bit over time, more similar to that assets under management model that we talked about. And for the most part, you would see if someone were to take a commission on a mutual fund, they're going to be paid somewhere between 5 to 7% to put that person's money into that particular mutual fund. The big issue I've always taken with that is most people don't know that happened until 6 or 7 years later. And it doesn't have to necessarily be disclosed, or it didn't have to be disclosed in the past.
Yeah, not to get too ahead into the insurance side of things, but it is kind of similar, right? Where if the advisor sells a product, that product leads to a commission. That commission is what it is. The client in this case doesn't have any say in that necessarily. Now the advisor gets to choose, do they want to take it all up front and never get paid again? Or do they want to spread that commission out over time? Now, from a client's perspective, it's really hard to argue the upfront commission is good for the client, because then there just really isn't any financial incentive for the advisor to maintain that relationship because they got their paycheck, right?
Yep.
But the bottom line is people should just understand now in the mutual fund world, Matt, you spit out the number between 5 and 7%. Most of what I've seen on the mutual fund side personally is in that 5 to 5 3/4 range, depending. And a lot of these fund families to become more competitive have actually brought some of that down a little bit. But the bottom line is they're paid a commission. And so there is some incentive to stick to certain products. And on top of that, it's kind of like the airlines, Matt. You and I just had this conversation earlier today. We were talking about the airlines and like these frequent flyer programs, and how if you travel with any level of frequency, you tend to stick to one airline because of the perks that go along with it. In fact, I will sheepishly admit I've paid almost double for a flight because it was on the right airline that I wanted to be on, that I could have got it from somewhere else. But mutual fund families do that kind of stuff too, where if you put so much money with a mutual fund family, there could be incentives for the client, first of all. So their upfront loads, as they're called, or fees to get into them are less, but it could also be beneficial to the advisor side as well. But the bottom line is the product can dictate the recommendation. At least it leaves it open for the possibility of a conflict of interest. Yeah. You know, Matt, I know in this, when we started this podcast, we told everybody that we were going to go on the security side first, and then we were going to go to the insurance side, and we were going to explain exactly how advisors are paid if they also offer insurance. But because we had such a healthy discussion on the security side, I think we should break this up into 2 podcasts because it's just a lot of information to go over. And so I'm going to leave that as a teaser. I'm just going to say, you're going to have to tune into the next episode and we will go over exactly how advisors are paid should they offer insurance as part of their comprehensive planning. And I'll note it again, like I said at the beginning of the podcast, not every advisor also does insurance. You know, and insurances could be anything from health insurance to property casualty insurance to life insurance, long-term care. Annuities are insurance products. Some advisors even are CPAs and do taxes. The bottom line is you just need to understand what the advisor offers and what umbrella that falls under. But all these insurance products I just named do not fall under the SEC, and they do not fall under FINRA. It's a completely separate deal. And quite frankly, from an advisor's perspective, you could argue maybe in a lot of ways, Matt, I'll see if you agree with this, kind of have to wear a little bit of a different hat on the insurance side than you do on the security side.
Absolutely. Yeah. Completely different approach altogether. You're looking at it from a completely different lens as part of the overall plan. So yeah.
Yeah, I think probably the teaser of all teasers, because I think there's probably less clarity when it comes to how advisors are paid when it comes to insurance, whether it's life insurance or annuities or otherwise. And there's a lot of thoughts are out there around that. And we'll get into specifics. We'll tell you exactly not only how we're paid, but how much we're paid and give you a general sense of what the industry looks like if you tune into the next episode.
I like that. I like that cliffhanger. Nice job.
It wasn't planned, but it was pretty good. So as always, guys, thanks so much for listening to Every Day is Saturday. We hope this was at least educational and maybe a little bit of fun, maybe a little bit. If you want to reach out to us here at Fiat, you can find us on our website. That's going to get you all of the information that you need. That is www.fiatwm.com. You can also subscribe to our podcast if you have not done so already. We don't want you to miss an episode, especially when it comes to figuring out how we're paid. We love it if you'd share it with your family and your loved ones. As always, guys, I'm Brad Gatto. This is my partner, Matt Stahl. Thank you. And we will see you guys next Saturday.
But Brad, today's not Saturday.
Matt, every day is Saturday.
Thank you for listening to Every Day is Saturday. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Fiat Wealth Management or Foundations Investment Advisors. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.